Welcome to Quilling It, where authors spill the ink on writing, publishing, and promoting your book in today's market.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. I'm Paul Regner.
And I'm Lindsay Franklin.
And today we are talking about introvert. Yeah, see, I knew I would mess it up. I'm going to keep that because it just shows that we don't edit this. Introverted writers in an extroverted industry. There it is. See,
Yay!
I got in my head. I'm like, am I going to be able to say this? And then I got in my own head and screwed it up.
Before we went live, he said, it's a little bit of a tongue twister. I'm going to go for it.
And then I messed it up. Oh, boy. Well, that's fitting. Well, very good. We're just going to go with it. We're going to roll with it. So as I think most authors, I would say, are probably on the introverted side of that introvert extrovert spectrum, right? Would you kind of agree to that? Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
So that's based on our experience. And I think probably that leads you to be an author in the first place. It's one of the reasons. It's like you're more of an observational person. You kind of think and reflect about all these things, and it's just sort of naturally lends itself to writing about these things. Mm-hmm. And I think over the years, what is expected of an author has changed. Wouldn't you say, Lindsay?
Absolutely. I think gone are the days where you could just be a recluse, kind of holed up in your little, writer cave on your typewriter, writing the next great American novel. And then just, sending those pages off to your publisher and then they do the rest. That's just not the world that we live in anymore. And especially if you are an indie author, that's 100% not all that you need to do in order to be successful and get your work out there. But it's true for traditional authors as well. There are many more demands placed on us than just writing the book these days.
Yeah, right. Well, like the internet has changed so much about the whole author journey, right? Like now, I think it's pretty much expected, whether you're indie or traditional, that you're out there promoting your stuff online somewhere, whether it's social media or you have a blog, or make sure you get your author website out there. And it's crazy. It's like I feel like there's more expected of you. I'm trying to think back in the days. I know like Mark Twain and even Charles Dickens, they would go out and they do speaking engagements every so often. But as far as I know, that was more rare, or maybe Twain was more of a speaker, but I don't know. Like, I haven't looked into the history too deeply, obviously, but it's so different now. It's like now everyone is expected to like, oh, you got to put posts. How many followers do you have? Even when you're trying to submit to publishers, right? It's like, oh, what's your platform like? How many followers? Yep. You work for a traditional publisher. So how does that, like, what are the expectations you typically see?
Yeah. So at Enclave, we are a little bit of an outlier in the industry where platform is less important for us. Because Steve, when he's reading a manuscript, he does all of our acquisitions. And so when he's reading a submission, he is really almost exclusively looking at the story and looking at the writing. And that's all he's thinking about. That is not typical at all in the industry. And so, but even for us at Enclave, it is a huge bonus if we get a writer and it's like, yes, I am really, functional on social media, or I know about marketing, or I understand about, how to promote myself, or I have a platform. I mean, that's going to be a huge plus. We're not ever publishing anybody simply because they have a platform, which does happen sometimes at certain publishers, but it is a huge bonus and definitely would be, very appealing to us at Enclave, where it's like, okay, this person has a following and they know what to do. They're not going to need as much hand holding on our end, which is always really nice. But Yeah, the expectations placed on authors these days, it's quite different. And for many of us, this is like the opposite of our actual skill set
Hmm.
because we are introverted and introspective and all of those things where, we express ourselves better in writing or maybe aren't even comfortable putting our faces out there or anything like that. And we're sort of expected to do all of that. And
Right.
especially, I mean, I just died inside a little bit when video content became the thing because I was like, no, I have to be on camera now. Are you kidding me? Like, I could get a really well angled selfie where I'm like, okay, I'm fine, posting like a photo of my face or whatever. But with video content, I can't hide the fact that I have this like rubbery, expressive face and all this stuff if I'm in motion. So yeah, it's stuff changes and it can be really overwhelming when that's not what you're naturally good at as a writer who just wants to
Right.
tell stories.
Yeah, yeah, and I know, like, both of us, at least in our young years, we were more introverted. Like, I would say as I've gotten older, I'm kind of more maybe in the middle of the spectrum, at least when it comes to certain things. Like when I'm talking about writing, it's like a lot of that anxiety and stuff goes away because it's like, oh man, I love to talk about this, and or
Yeah.
anything speculative fiction related, really. Like if I get around a table and I overhear someone talking like Star Wars or something like that, I'm like, oh, I'm in. Like, what are we talking about? Yeah, I'm ready to geek out, and like I don't care. I don't have any kind of social anxiety at that point. But I think as I've gotten older and gotten more comfortable in my own skin, I guess it's less of an issue now, but I still have that introvert inside where, if I'm at a social thing, I have to, like, after a while, retreat and kind of be by myself for a
Mhm.
little bit, recharge, and then, okay, I'm ready. Now I can get back out there. So for some of the writers out there, maybe especially like beginning writers, this probably is a very overwhelming idea. Like, oh no, I have to promote my stuff too, and I have to be out there. And so, what would you say were some of the things that helped you, in that early stage when you went through that? Like, oh no, now I've got to promote and I've got to put myself out there, and like, I don't want to do that. Like, what did you do to kind of like deal with that?
I think that because I am a dinosaur, I have the benefit of having been on social media since its inception, right? So, my fellow dinosaurs, I know what a sad thing to say at 43 years old or whatever, but truly in the social media space, if you're 43, you are a dinosaur. I apologize to my fellow dinos out there, but,
No,
you
no,
know,
now you can say the back in my day story. Back in my day, there
back
was
in
no
my day,
internet.
oh my gosh, my daughter who's 18 was laughing at me the other day. I mentioned MySpace and she was like, "Oh, mom,
Oh,
MySpace," but like, yes, MySpace. That
I
was
miss MySpace. I liked MySpace.
back in the day. And I was not in the industry at all because MySpace was what, like 2005, 2006, that era,
Probably, yeah.
somewhere in there. And that was before I got into the industry. So I got on MySpace, I think, if I recall correctly, to spy on my youth kids because I was a youth leader at the time. And so they were all on, I did high school, girls ministry. And
Hmm.
so they were all on MySpace. So it's like, okay, I'm going to join. I would have been in my mid 20s or something. I had little kids, and it's like, I'm going to join MySpace to see what my girls are doing and
All
make
the
sure they're
cool kids are on MySpace.
it's like their parents weren't going to join. It was like,
Right.
before any of the other generations had gotten on social media. So I was like, I'll do it. And it was kind of cool, but not a thing that I would normally have gotten into myself, I don't think. And probably would not have stayed on if not for my career in the writing space. So
Hmm.
when Facebook first came around, because then that was kind of the next thing, that
Yeah.
was also just a little bit before I got into the industry. And what I observed in the maybe 1 or 2 years where I was on Facebook, but not yet in the writer space or trying to do anything with an author platform, I observed that people I had been going to church with for years, like almost 10 years at that point, not quite, but more than 5. Okay, so my husband and I and my little kids, we had been going to this church for years and years and years. I'd been working in ministry there, worshiping with these people, for a long time, missions trips, all kinds of things. And I realized that these people got to know me so much better in the few months that I had been on social media than they had in all of those years that I had been serving alongside them, worshiping
Hmm.
alongside them in church. And that was such an interesting revelation for me because I was like, okay, this seems like something I'm not into, social media, because it's
Yeah.
like, why would an introvert want to be on social media? But I could actually write on that platform and I would tell a joke on Facebook in my little status update that I probably would be too shy to say in person, but I
Mm.
was okay writing it and posting it. And so people got to know my humor. They got to know me at a deeper level than they did hanging out with me for years in person because I wasn't super close with those people necessarily. Um, so that kind of shifted something in my brain when it came to social media and when it came time to do this as an author, where it was like, okay, maybe there is a way to do this where it's actually very, uh, very natural for me, even as an introvert, because it's really just about being myself and being authentic and letting
Mm.
people get to know the real me rather than trying to be very performative or copy what anybody else is doing out there or trying to jump on the latest trend. And I will kind of add some caveats to that later because you do need to do that a little bit, but always coming from a space of just being true to who you are and letting people get to know you. If I think of it that way, then that's something that feels very natural and very like okay for me to do as an introvert rather than thinking, oh my gosh, I'm out here on the internet posting myself constantly. Is like, I get the ick and I just don't want to if I think of it that way.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, totally. I mean, I can relate with the dinosaur thing. I was there at the inception of social media and
I was there
MySpace
when
and
it
all
was
that.
written.
I was there when it all began. But I do remember, and I probably wouldn't have signed up either, except like at the time I was in a band. I was a drummer in a band, and I liked sort of being behind because it's like I'm not the front man. I'm not right out there and like, oh, we have a band like presence on on MySpace, and then later on the others. But it just felt like, oh, okay, this is what you have to do these days to help promote your stuff, your art, whatever it happens to be. So then, yeah, when I started writing, it was kind of like, oh, okay, I already have experience. I guess this is, sort of how you promote yourself. Now, it's changed over the years, right? Like I've listened to stuff now that, there's questionable stats on how much your social media can actually influence book sales, right? But that's
Mhm.
just one metric, right? Like book sales is important, but like is that all? Like so maybe it's good to take a step back and say like why you're doing it. And if it's something that you're getting out what you are trying to put in. Like if you're just saying I'm only on here for book sales, maybe that's not the best place for you to be. But it's good. I think it's good for you to be somewhere. It doesn't have to be social media, but maybe you can do a blog where people are following. Do people still follow blogs? Blogs used to be huge too, right? That's another thing
You
that's
know,
changed.
yes, when I first got into the industry, like 2010, I mean, blogs were all the
Right.
rage.
That was the thing. Yeah.
That was the thing. But I
Yeah.
feel like it's circled back a little bit because they blogs majorly fell off, but then it's circled
Yeah.
back a bit in the form of Substack because Substack is
I was
like
going to mention Substack. Yeah.
yes, that is to me, I look at that and go, okay, so we're back in the blogosphere. Like that's what it
Right.
feels like to me. And it's kind of a combo of that and an email list. And so it's a
Hmm.
very cool, cool thing and can be something that does feel more sustainable if you have that kind of article writing type of
Hmm.
vibe to what you do or those kind of reflections, that feels really natural to you as a writer. That can be a really good way to sort of do what we need to do as writers and putting ourselves out there, getting our names out there a little bit more, and building that platform, but in a way that is authentic to you and feels comfortable for you. And it's weird. There's a lot of ways to approach this
Yeah.
that can kind of answer the question or scratch the itch, so to speak, from where it's like, how can I do this in a way that feels authentic? And for some people, it might be leaning really hard on the book promo part of things. And what I mean
Mhm.
by that is if you're going to have like a whole TikTok account, say, that is devoted to just book promo, that is a very uh, effective way to get your name out there, get your books titles out there. And it's not about you as an individual, you as an author or your platform, whatever. It's just about getting the concept of that book into the feeds of people who might be interested in reading it. So it's almost more like you're creating an advertising account. And that's the whole point of the account. And it's not going to irritate anybody whose feed that would show up because they're searching for that type of content. And so that can
Right.
actually be a way for somebody who is really shy and does not want to have their whole, self, like as an actual human out there on the internet. There are kind of ways around it where you can still build your platform and it can still, get the name of your work out there
Mhm.
without feeling like you're having to put yourself out there in a way that you're really not comfortable with. And I kind of went the opposite direction with my stuff where I was just like, I'm just going to be my weird self and I'm going to, post my stuff that I think is funny or cute or whatever. And so people through my socials typically will get to know me more than like, here's all my book promo stuff. And then of course I talk about my books as well. It's just different approaches to how you
Yeah.
can do social media and build a presence out there in a way that feels okay for you and not like you just hate this part of your job or your career as an author, because everything we do needs to feel sustainable, otherwise we will burn out and we'll just
Yeah.
walk away and give up.
Yeah, I think that's a good principle too. Like, I feel like whatever you do, it has to be something that you kind of enjoy, or something maybe you just are good at, like you take to. Which I would think you'd kind of enjoy it if you're kind of a natural at it. And I think like so, my approach was, to most social media is, I kind of keep it writing related. I don't, that introvert part of me wants my privacy of like my family. So I don't really
Mhm.
post a lot of family stuff. I don't post like, hey, here's my family doing this. Cause I don't know. I feel like that's the separation. Like, no, that's my private life. But I'll talk all about like stories and books and here's my favorite movies and here's my favorite books and oh, did you see the new, Marvel movie or whatever it is? I feel like it's all related. So I'm kind of sticking within like a genre or a topic where people that might follow me or whatever, they're already interested in that, or else they probably wouldn't be following me because it's all related to really my writing stuff. So that's kind of what I do across any platform. But you mentioned Substack, and I kind of want to mention a little bit more on that just because I think this is a new one that is almost for writers combined the best of a lot of different worlds. Because if you go on Substack, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, there's like a feed, which is kind of like a Twitter sort of thing. So you could do that if that's your thing. There's also, you can do posts that could be kind of like a blog post almost,
Mhm.
or like what I did with it. There's a lot of authors that do like episodic storytelling on there. So you could write a story, which they call it episodes, which are really just like very short chapters almost. And they usually have a cliffhanger. It's kind of like the old Pulp Fiction-y kind of writing style. And it's fun if you like that type of storytelling. And then you can like just do weekly posts or whatever of like, oh, hey, here's my ongoing story. Like tune in next week for the next chapter or the next episode. And that's a fun aspect of it. Or if if you wanted to treat it more like a blog, you could do it that way too. But that could also be like a newsletter. And I
Mhm.
think newsletters is always something that we mentioned that's like one of the very most important thing you can do as an author, because everyone that opts in to get your newsletter is someone saying, I'm so interested in what you're doing, I'm going to let you spam me. Not spam, but I'm going to accept your email into my inbox and
Mhm.
actually read it, which is pretty cool because that's like a free fan. You're not spending money on advertising. You're just like, hey, here's my latest book, or here's what's going on in my author life. And that's like the most important, or one of the most important. But Substack has that too. You could do like almost a separate little newslettery kind of thing that's going to their inbox. And you could do videos on there. You could even do like podcasting. Like, I
Mhm.
guess if I wanted to, I could put up, our podcast episodes. I haven't done that yet, but maybe that's a future thing we could consider.
Ooh.
But yeah, there's just a lot of different avenues you could take if you do the Substack. And as far as I've seen, the algorithm hasn't gotten weird. Like, I don't know, the algorithm on Facebook and even Instagram, I feel like has changed over the years, and
Mhm.
I'm not getting the normal like these are the people I follow kind of feed. Now it's like all this other stuff is thrown in, like that they think I'll be interested in, and a lot of times it's not. So it's just weird. It's like, what's going on?
Mhm.
So, anyways, now I'm rambling, so I'm just going to throw it back to you.
No, I think this brings up a really good point about the way that things have evolved. So sometimes stuff evolves in ways that's really helpful, other times it's
Mhm.
not so helpful. So I think you're, in my experience, totally right about the algorithm. Like Facebook used to be, and I almost cannot even relate to this anymore, but Facebook used to be this really fun place
Mhm.
for me to go to. And it was
Yeah.
how I stayed connected to a lot of my friends and, from eras past in my life, but also my in-person real life friends. And it was just this kind of like fun space. And it
Mhm.
is the opposite of that
Yeah.
for
What
me now.
happened?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
Yeah, it's kind of a jungle in there these days, and it just is overrun with a lot of just stuff that I find very draining. And so,
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
not the same as it used to be. And
Yep.
Instagram has resisted that, at least in my feed, a little bit. And maybe that's because my Instagram has always been more focused on books, whereas on when I started on Facebook, that was my personal profile because I wasn't in the industry yet. And so that might be part of the reason why it's a lot more muddled for me over there. And Instagram is a little bit kind of cleaner, so to speak,
Mm.
with the algorithm where I get more relevant content
Mm.
there. But even some of that stuff that has kind of mucked up Facebook is starting to creep over on Instagram. It's like,
Yep.
no, leave me alone.
Yes, I know. I see
Go
it too. Yeah.
away. But one of the ways that the evolution has been helpful, I think, is there isn't like the one size fits all solution anymore. We
Mm.
mentioned blogging back in the day and how that was like the end all be all
Yeah.
in the, early 2010s. And it was like, well, you need a blog. If you're a writer, you need a blog. And I'm
Right.
going, well, okay, but I write fiction. What am I
Right.
blogging about? I don't know what to say. And so some of my historical author friends would be like, oh, I have all of my history tidbits and this day and,
Yeah.
1942 or whatever. And all that stuff is super cool. But I'm like, okay, well, I could post about the world that I'm building that no one knows anything about yet. No one cares because
Right.
no one has read any of my stuff. That's so hard to do as an unpublished fiction author. Like, what do I blog about? But that was the prevailing wisdom was
Mm.
everybody needs a blog. And then when Instagram started to get big, everybody needs to be on Instagram. And then,
Mhm.
TikTok, everyone needs to be on TikTok. Or YouTube was kind of in between those two things. But, and I feel like these days there are a lot of options out there, a lot of different platforms and different types of content. We have podcasts now, we have Substack type stuff. We do still have blogs. If that is your bread and butter, totally a cool place to be still. There are people who follow blogs and it depends, especially for nonfiction people. Oh my goodness, that can still
Yeah.
be a really great space to be. Um, but it's not one size fits all anymore. You have to find the platforms and the type of content that really feels authentic and sustainable. Those are my two words for this episode:
Yeah.
authentic and sustainable, because that is the way I feel to meet the demands, these extroverted demands that the industry place on us, as writers, many of whom are introverts. Like, we need to do things that are not going to burn us out, and we actually have options these days. So
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
you
Yeah.
made me think of like a specific example. Like, I'm thinking, um, there was a time when like creating videos, like either funny videos or writing related videos or about your writing or whatever. And some people were just really good at it. They were just natural. They were funny. They had all these followers, and usually it was with a very specific genre. So it was like people that like the genre and people that like the personality of this person, and it just really like helped get their stuff out there. And then you just have to go, oh man, that's awesome. Like maybe we should all do that. And the answer is no, we shouldn't.
No.
And that's not, and especially something like that is probably not, I would think most introverts aren't really great at that. Like just all of a sudden being on camera and being like this entertainer, at some respects, that's hard to do. And you could say, you could hear that advice, like you're saying, like, well, that's what you got to do. Look at this person; they sold 20,000 books by doing that. And then you try it, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so horrible at this, but I guess I'm supposed to do it. And that's where I would always say, like what you said, the principle would be like, does this work? Is this sustainable? Do you feel natural doing this? And if the answer is no, I would say, don't do it. Like find something that you can do and that you feel like comfortable doing. And that like I think the one exception I would make is the author newsletter, because I feel like that's so important. But I feel like you can find like anyone, well, like most anyone could find a natural way to do a newsletter, right?
Yes.
And just to say like, here's what's going on. And here's a couple interesting things in my writing career right now, or here's my latest book or my latest cover, whatever it is, like find a way to do a newsletter that feels natural to you. But yeah, that would be the one thing I say, like everyone should do a newsletter. But everything else, I'm like, only do it if it feels natural, if you enjoy it, otherwise spend your time on writing your next book. That's like my principle for all this stuff. Like you could spend so much time trying to do all these things, but the most important thing you could do is write your next book. But yeah, you need some of this stuff. Just find out what works for you, and doesn't feel too awkward and extroverted for your personality.
And sometimes when you were talking about email lists, this made me think of something, because I've had an email list for a long time, and then I absolutely neglected it for like 4 years. I did not send a single email, which is terrible practice. Nobody do that. But I was very like burnt out after I released my my first series, and I was recharging creatively, and I was actually writing a lot of nonfiction in that 4-year space. But then when it was time to do my current duology, I was like, oh my goodness, my poor neglected email list. I need to get back into this. So I started being really intentional about it again. And, I was kind of struggling to find my way with it, where it's like, okay, here's the news for the month, or here's what's going on. Here's my exciting cover reveal, or my whatever, and all that stuff that you put in there. And, it was fine. It was doing its thing. And then this year, I cannot remember when it was. It was some point during the spring. And I think I was feeling really like overwhelmed. There's a lot going on in my life, just personal life. And I just sat down and started writing what felt more like a devotional almost, which I've written a lot of devotionals, but that's something I very consciously keep separate from my fiction stuff. I don't really talk about my nonfiction. There's not an expectation with my publisher that I'm doing that, because my contracts with those books are different. And so they handle all of that, and I don't have to think about it, which is cool. But I try to keep that really separate, so that my readers know what they're getting from me when, they sign up for my email newsletter list, or when they buy a Lindsay Franklin book, fiction wise or whatever, they know what to expect. So I just have tried to keep the branding quite separate over the years. But I just was sort of in that space where I had things to say. And they were specifically things to say about God, or the conversations I was having with God at that moment in my life. And so I just started writing that. And it was like the little, kind of intro, I guess, into my newsletter, where I still had all my news and here's some sales going on, or giveaway I'm doing, or whatever. But I had this little like almost Devo personal reflection at the front of it. And I sent that out, and I started getting texts from like family members who are on my email list, and some of my really close friends, people who would have my cell phone number, texting me about it. And it's saying, I really loved what you wrote this month in your newsletter. I was like, oh, that's cool. Thank you. And then I started getting email responses from some of my readers who received that email. And it was like it struck a nerve, or, it just kind of hit in a way that if I was sitting there with my marketing brain thinking, oh no, keep that part of your writer life really separate because these are your fiction people and don't, muddy
Right.
the waters with your spiritual reflections, Lindsay, or whatever. But it was like it hit for not just the people who know me really well personally, but there were readers who were responding that way too. And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
this is probably more of what they want from me. And because
Mm.
I don't do that as much on my socials, because that's the introvert in me where I don't want to be like quite that vulnerable on
Hmm.
the internet, but this is my email newsletter list, and it's not the same as where it's not like I know everybody on the list personally, of course, but it does feel a little bit more private, a little bit more intimate, where I
Hmm.
can talk about some things that are a little bit more personal, and it's not the same as posting it on the internet. And there's nothing in there
Right.
that if somebody shared it publicly that I would be embarrassed about, of course, but it feels like a slightly safer space maybe to do
Mm.
that. And so I've been doing that since, and every single time I send one of those out, I will have people who respond and say, wow, this really touched me, or I really appreciated what you said this month, or whatever. It's like, oh, okay, that's what I'm supposed to be writing about. And so sometimes it's not even what you think it's going to be, the thing that your people want from you. And so it can take a little while to find what kind of content is sort of you. And that's very different from what people on Instagram want from me. And there's a lot of
Hmm.
the same people are on my list as are on my Instagram, but it's like, they're expecting slightly different things from me from platform to platform. So that can be a process of trial and error. But kind of cool actually, because it makes me feel like, okay, Instagram is the place where I'm going to be a little funnier, a little goofy, or I can be cheeky over there. And then maybe I'll be a little bit more serious in my, in my emails. And that's my place to get more reflective. So it's just finding that space that feels comfortable and hits with your audience and the people who have signed up to follow you in that particular space.
Yeah. The different sides of Lindsay Franklin. No, yeah, that's totally and that's a good point. Like, depending on the platform, there might be a slightly different vibe, to what you're doing. I think too, like another thing I was going to mention is, like I run Amazon ads, and I
Mhm,
would say my Amazon ads are probably one of the biggest drivers of sales for me.
mhm,
At least, I mean, I can see the metrics like right there, and I can see like, oh, how did the ads affect those? And I would say like that's probably my biggest thing. Like sometimes I'll send a newsletter out and like, hey, I got a new book, and I'll see like, oh, I have made 10 more sales today. Like that's pretty cool. But ads, I'm looking at daily and tweaking, and I can really, and that's a very like, there's no extrovert qualities needed
yes,
for
yes.
something like that. So that might speak to someone who's like, I'm not comfortable with any social media or any of that stuff. Like, what can I do? So I would offer that up as like, you can run ads. I mean,
Mhm,
that's very like, logical, and there's really no personality to it. And, essentially you're doing metrics, it's very, calculations and that kind of
mhm.
thing, where I'm running this ad and I'm looking at the daily metrics, and here's my sales and here's how the ad, so that can be really appealing to, I think, to a lot of people. So there's that. And I would imagine most ads are kind of like that,
Mhm.
and you don't really need to do any kind of performance for that
Yes.
kind of promotion. So there's one offering for those that might be like kind of reeling as we offer these, different things of getting your voice out there. Like, no, I don't want to do any of that. So there you go. Ads.
Yeah. That can be a really effective place to put your time and money. And especially when the content piece gets like creating content, if that gets exhausting or overwhelming. For me, I really struggle with consistency. because I have two speeds, which are 100 miles an hour and 0 miles an hour. And so I'm just always kind of running on one or the other. And so sometimes I'm 100 miles an hour and I've got all these ideas and content and it just boom, 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 boom. And then it's like I disappear off of the planet for, a few months on social media. And sometimes that's because my health crashes or I'm just really busy. I'm on deadline and socials are going to be the first thing that go for me because it's not like a must do, it's a should do, like if I disappear from Instagram, nothing in my world is going to implode, but the algorithm does hate that. And so my socials are a constant thing of where I will start getting a lot of traction and things are going good. And then I disappear. And so the next time I come on, it's like, oh, 3 people saw my post. Yay. And it's like terrible because that inconsistency, the algorithms hate that. They want you to be posting constantly, but that can be a recipe for burnout. And so running ads and really getting very good at that. It's like the refined version of that type of TikTok account that I was talking about where you're posting, book posts and it's constantly, stuff where you're pitching your book, promoting it, and it's not your face at all. It's like book pages or, blurbs, images that speak to what that book is about. That's like, it's kind of a more relaxed, less formal way of running ads essentially. And so you can do the much more, metric heavy and probably more scientific way of doing it is to like officially run ads on Amazon or, there are some other platforms that sometimes people recommend like running Facebook ads, but
or BookBub is another
BookBub,
one. You can do some ads. Yeah.
Do ads,
I would say
deals.
like I think you mentioned in the previous podcast episode that you were teaching about like, self-care, I think you called it, for authors and just, finding ways to recharge your batteries and things like that. And I think that's another important piece of this puzzle where you're connecting somehow with some other authors out there. Like maybe it's in a critique group, maybe it's people you met at a writer's conference or people you even met online. When you have those people around you that are helping like support you and kind of cheer for you and those kind of things, that can be very helpful too, in that introvert kind of thing where it's like, oh my gosh, I'm alone and I'm shouting to the world, this cold, impersonal world, So when you have people around you that like, say you do a post or whatever, and they're all like, hey, good job, that's cool. Yeah, I'm excited or whatever it is. It's like, that can be very helpful, like as a support system for like, and something that might be nervous to you of like, oh, I got to put out a personal thing. Well, I do have my critique group and those friends that will at least, support my efforts. And so I think it's important to have those kind of things around. And, but you probably have much more to say about that because you actually teach about that. So I'm going to throw that over to you and see what you have to say.
Yeah, it's definitely an important piece, especially in the beginning when you're first getting used to that. As you said, like putting yourself out there for the first time, having people who know you a little bit better, love you, support you, having them there to kind of, it feels a lot more comfortable and like a little bit of a safer space to experiment and to start finding finding your niche on social media. And there's a weird other side to that where so for my journey, okay, we'll talk about my journey on Instagram. So my Instagram has always been book focused from minute one, because that's a platform that was created after I was already on socials as an author. So minute one, it was more about that than a personal profile for me. And so I had, I think, a couple hundred followers. I'm not sure how many exactly before my debut released. And then The Story Peddler released, and suddenly it was like, oh, I'm not even like posting a ton, or I'm just posting, my same stuff here and there. And suddenly there were like all of these new followers coming in and people who I didn't know personally or weren't, like one person removed from someone I know personally, or I didn't meet them at a writer's conference, or, oh, these are actually not writers. These are readers. And so my socials really changed a lot after I published rather my debut novel. And so I suddenly had a lot more notifications to deal with, a lot more DMs to deal with, and just a lot of strangers talking to me through my comments. And so that can be a little weird or startling, especially as an introvert, to transition from these are my friends, these are my critique group people. And then now it's suddenly not that anymore. It's people I don't know. They only know me through my books. And so if you've ever heard the term parasocial relationship, that is something that we need to be careful of. And it's where there's a content creator or a public figure out there, and you feel like you know that person because you follow them, or you've read their books, or you've seen their TV show, or you listen to their podcast, or whatever it is. And we do get to know those people, especially if they're being authentic on, in their books or on their platforms. We do get to know them. But sometimes we feel like we are closer to them than we really are, And so that's something that on the creator side of that, you do have to be really careful about that and making sure that you have boundaries in place where you are not getting it twisted, that, these are still people who you do have a connection with them, but it's not the same as your friends anymore. It's not the same as that little core group that was supporting you in the beginning and that made it like a safe space for you to do that. And so you do need to protect yourself and make sure that you're being savvy and safe, and also not falling into the trap of feeling like you have to respond to every single request or every single comment needs, a bunch of time and energy from you. And, because it's very easy to shift from I'm so shy and introverted and nobody wants to be my friend to, wow, I have 3,000 friends suddenly, and everybody wants a piece of me. And, and so I need to be this like people pleasing person because, wow, this is so exciting. This is what I, hoped would happen when I started talking about my book, and now here it is. But like, it can just be really weird to shift from, wow, I wish anyone was listening, to, whoa, there's a lot of people listening suddenly overnight. And so, it's important to kind of make sure that you have really good boundaries in place and you keep yourself in a good headspace of not kind of becoming a slave to it, not to like use that's a very strong word, but I couldn't think of one that was conveyed what I wanted to say without or it being a little more toned down. But where you just feel like you are beholden to this constant hamster wheel of like, I have to make sure that I'm responding and doing this and doing that, and making sure you meet all the expectations of those people who don't really know you. They are invested, and that's amazing. I love those connections that I have with readers on socials, but it's okay to have like just a little half step of distance.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Because otherwise you have no time left to write your actual book.
Exactly, because it is so time consuming. Oh my gosh.
Have you ever had anyone when you go to a conference that like, because you said like it's almost like you feel like you know the person, like, and come up to you and like, oh yeah, Lindsay, oh my gosh, and then you're like, who are you? I don't know what to do. This is awkward.
I used to be so good with this. Like my working memory is not good, but once something goes into like kind of the deeper recesses of my brain, my memory is good. But there came a point after my debut released, and probably I held on for probably like a year or two after that, where I could still like recognize somebody and be like, I know your handle on Instagram. I know who you are. Like I know your first name and your handle, like, because I recognize you from your profile picture. But it reached a point where I can't do that anymore. I don't know everybody. And I typically know everybody who's been on my street team. Like for any of my books, if somebody's been on my street team, because I see their names, I speak more one-on-one with those people a lot more frequently. I try to follow all of them back on Instagram, at least for the period of time they're on my team, and often just indefinitely, I'll continue following them. So yes, I have had that experience, but sometimes, more often for me, it's I know you, but I don't know where I know you
Right.
from.
Yeah,
Did
I
we
have a
meet
lot
in
of those.
person or do I know you from Instagram? Is it something else? Like, so I wish that were not the case. I wish I could still remember absolutely everything, but I've been in the industry too long and the platforms just get too like, big at some point. And I'm not even that big on
Right.
Instagram or anywhere, but it's too many for me to remember absolutely everybody. I always feel so bad though.
It's funny. I've been on both sides of the spectrum. I remember like there was one time I was going to Realm Makers and someone contacted me online. I think it was it Facebook at the time? I'm not on Facebook anymore, but I can't remember. But anyways, they're like, "Hey, you're going to the conference?" Because I think I posted like, "I'm going to Realm Makers this year," and they're like, "Hey, I'm going too. Like, I like your stuff. We should meet up and we'll get some coffee or something." And I'm like, "Okay, like, I don't know you. I guess I'll have coffee." But then, when I went and I met this person, they're actually really cool and it was fun. And it's like, oh, it's totally normal. It's all good. Like, they're not crazy. But then
Yay.
I did the same thing. Like I had just finished reading Stephen James' book. It was one of his craft books. It was Story Trump Structure, which was really good because it was written from the pantser kind of perspective. I'm like, oh, I love this book. And I had just finished it and I went to Realm Makers and I'm on the elevator and then Stephen James gets on. And all of a sudden, like my nerd comes out. I'm like, Stephen James, like, hey, yeah, I just read your book. And I was like this total like obsessed fan, for some reason. I just got all excited. He's like, hey, yeah, great. Thanks. Okay. I got a class to teach. I'll see you later. I think I freaked him out or something. And I was like, oh my gosh, that was so embarrassing. Why did I do that? So, yeah, we can be on all sides of that spectrum. It's fun.
That is really cool when that happens though. Like as
Yeah,
a writer, and I'm sure it's happened to Stephen James like a billion times, but
probably.
I can remember the first time I was walking through, I think it was walking down the hall in the hotel in St. Louis for Realm Makers the year after. So my debut would have released May that year, and this would have been July or whenever we were having Realm Makers that year. And somebody who I didn't know stopped me in the hall to have me sign their copy of the Story Builder. And I was like,
that's a nice moment.
wow. Like it was so cool to have that happen. And that was really weird. Like, too, that sort of started where conferences changed for me because I had been attending conferences forever. And as a shy person, kind of invisible whenever I want to be. I could just disappear into the back of the classroom or just kind of slip off by myself and be really invisible whenever I needed to do that. And after that 2018 kind of debut year, that was not really a thing anymore. If I want to be invisible, I usually just need to go to my room or go to a conference or a convention where no one knows who I am, because absolutely those do exist. Just in the Christian writing space, it's like not so much the thing anymore. But if I go to like a big general market event or something, I am completely invisible, and sometimes that is just a-okay with me. I like going back to that where it's like, yes, I just get to kind of attend and soak things up from that perspective. I love getting to do that.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I think we're running a little long here, so we should probably wrap this up. Do you have any final thoughts? Did we miss anything that might be helpful to the introverts out there? I think we covered a lot of ground. I think
we covered a lot of ground. Yeah, just make sure you give yourself time to recharge and remember those two words of authenticity, sustainability. Those are the two things. Whatever that means for you, the answer is going to be different for everybody. There's no right or wrong. It's just what you can maintain and what feels comfortable and right for you. Don't be afraid to step outside the box. I don't cringe about the video content anymore the way that I used to. And I actually enjoy it when I have the time to do that. So it's okay to step outside your comfort zone, but just make sure that it's something that feels authentic and real for you and not like you're cosplaying somebody else and trying to copy whatever the new trend is.
Yeah. Good closing thoughts. Excellent. Okay. Thank you everyone for listening, and we will see you again on the next episode. Bye.